Have you ever been DM'd so often about a movie since its release that you basically have to drop all your other video plans to prioritize it? That's me. That happened with me and Over the Moon on Netflix. So, alright, here it is. The most important thing to note about this movie is that it was produced by Netflix in association with an actual Chinese studio, Pearl Studio, which is based in Shanghai. So there's no such thing as it being culturally wrong, hence why this video is titled differently from my Mulan ones. Because being Chinese obviously isn't a monolithic thing, so experiences vary. But I will say I've lived in China for half my life, and the depictions in this movie, check out. So I'm here to explain exactly what felt familiar to me and why, and tell you guys a little bit about what it's like to live in modern China. The movie starts off with the protagonist Fei-fei's mom telling her a story about the space dog, which takes a bite out of the moon each night, leading to the moon phases, until the moon goddess Chang'e makes it spit out the moon pieces. This is based on the real myth of the sky dog, or Tiangou, which is believed to eat the moon during lunar eclipses. I think the moon phases association was made up for this movie, though I wouldn't be surprised if I was wrong and it was like a local legend or something. Also, fun fact, the kanji for the Japanese Tiangou is probably derived from Tiangou, though they're like two very different creatures. The Japanese Tiangou isn't even a dog. Then Fei-fei's mom briefly tells the story of Chang'e, the moon goddess, and her husband Houyi. I don't think this movie actually got into Houyi's own legend, so let me talk about it here. Also, his name is technically just Yi. Houyi is a tribal leader during the same era that he often gets confused with, though the confusion's been happening for like 3,000 years now, so it doesn't really matter anymore. And this movie calls him Houyi, so I'm gonna call him Houyi. Well, long ago, during very ancient times, there used to be 10 suns that would take turns rising each day. One day, all 10 of them decided to rise at once. This caused a huge drought, like the earth was cracking and the people were suffering, so the mythical King Yao decided to send Houyi, an expert archer, to deal with the issue. Now, stories differ on what Houyi actually was. Like, some say he was an actual divine archer descended from the heavens to help humanity, and others say he was just an ordinary boy who was abandoned in the woods when he was 5, and then, like, through the necessity of survival, became an expert archer by age 20. So he was either a literal god or a feral child. But anyway, he was very good at getting arrows into targets. So he took his trusty bow and arrow and tried to reason with the 10 sons at first, but they were like, what are you gonna do about it? So he shot them down. That's what he did. He got 9 of them before the son's mother was like, oh my god, no, stop! And even King Yao was like, dude, we actually need at least like 1 son. And so Houyi spared the last son, and it rose on schedule ever since. Something really interesting to note here is that in ancient Chinese myth, there were 10 suns at 12 moons. You know what's in the ancient Chinese calendar? 10 days per week and 12 months. Coincidence? I think not. There's also other cool stuff, like there being a legend where the son's mother bathes them every day, and I was like, what? At this legend for the longest time? But then I realized the people living on the very east coast of China would have seen the sun rising out of the Pacific Ocean each morning. Anyway, getting off topic, maybe I'll do a separate video on this someday. This moon and sun in Chinese myth. So after Houyi saved humanity from the terror of the 10 suns, he was given 2 pills of immortality from the Queen Mother of the West, who is another really cool person from Chinese myth that I might do a video on someday. Also, the English version of this movie calls the immortality pills potions, but this is because Chinese immortality pills are often translated as elixirs. This makes people think drinkable. It doesn't help that mercury is a key component. But no, Chinese immortality is cultivated in furnaces by Taoists, so they come in pill form. And the Chinese subtitles do reflect this. And so Houyi got 1 immortality pill for himself and 1 for his wife Chang'e. And here's where the story really starts diverging. Some say she took both pills while Houyi was out hunting, because he had turned into a tyrant and she was afraid that the people would suffer forever if he became immortal. Others say that his apprentice broke into his house and tried to steal the pills, so she took them both in a panic. And still others say she took both just out of pure greed. So for whatever reason, while Houyi was out, Chang'e took double the pills for double the immortality. And the effect was so great that she shot right past the Heavenly Court where the gods actually live and got stuck on the moon instead, with nothing but a jade rabbit as company. A rabbit who either makes medicine or rice cakes depending on which Asian country you're in. This is because people in that region thought the imprint of the moon looks like a rabbit. Oh, and there's also this guy, Wu Gong, who's like the Chinese Sisyphus. He was a Chinese immortal who was banished to the moon and only allowed out if he cuts down a tree. But plot twist, the tree heals itself after every cut he makes. And he also doesn't matter because he's not in this movie at all. I just had to mention that technically Chang'e does have a human roommate. Oh my god.
They were roommates.
Anyway, oh my god, I almost forgot I'm reviewing a movie. So So Fei-fei is really attached to the Chang'e legend, and we find out why when it cuts to her family's mooncake stall in a traditional-looking Chinese town. It has a distinct Jiangnan vibe, meaning south of the Yangtze River. It's the region where I'm from, actually. Lots of waterways and stone bridges and mild-flavored food. It's like the chillest part of China. But I have to clarify something here. Most towns in modern China do not look like this. When they do look like this, more likely or not, they're deliberately kept this way to be a tourist town or just a small protected heritage region. Most traditional buildings nowadays are getting torn down in favor of high-rises and skyscrapers. And there can be a lot of drama about it, like the real estate developer generally offers the inhabitants of those traditional buildings a lot of money to move away, but some refuse to move. And these people are called Dingzihu, or nail residents. But that doesn't apply because it's very likely that Fei-fei lives in a tourist town, because even her family's mooncake stall has a heavy emphasis on how they're an artisanal, time-honored brand that makes everything by hand. Oh, and if you don't know what mooncakes are, they're these round pastries with an egg yolk in the middle. Legend says that Houyi made them after Chang'e ascended to the moon because he missed her so much. I'm surprised they didn't include that tidbit in the movie. In the kitchen shots, there are a lot of familiar elements from traditional Chinese kitchens, like the brightly colored plastic bins, the hearth, and the giant wooden pot lid on the wall, and the string of chilies, and the random utensils. And how the floor tiles are like slightly suspiciously dirty. If you go to a small restaurant in China, don't go ask to see the kitchen. You will be discouraged. Though I'm pretty sure this applies to Western kitchens too. Like, I don't think restaurant workers across the world give as much as a crap as we hope they do. Anyway, because this is a kid's movie, it starts aiming to decimate your emotions right at the 6-minute mark. Her mom gets like K-drama style signs of terminal illness. Oh god. And while the mom is getting ready to bite the dust, poor unsuspecting Fei-fei is peddling her mooncakes. Peddlers are a common sight in modern China, though not so much in the biggest city anymore. So since Fei-fei's family trade is mooncakes, their lives basically revolve around the Mid-Autumn Festival, since that's the only time where people actually eat mooncakes. Unless you're like really thirsty for some off-season mooncakes, I guess. This holiday is basically like Chinese Thanksgiving, and it reportedly happens each year when the moon is at its roundest. Families get together on this day because round can also be read as reunion. And Fei-fei's family is so committed to this moon-themed brand that they get her a bunny! And then Fei-fei's mom bites the dust for real. You might have heard that white is the color of mourning instead of black, though that's more ancient times than modern. At modern funerals, you are expected to wear black, or at least like black or white. Though you can still see some white mourning stuff, like the pins that Fei-fei and her dad are wearing on their chests. Then it skips to 4 years later and Fei-fei's hair is a mess. This is technically unrealistic because Chinese teachers get so into your life that they will tell you to fix your hair if it is a mess. Though she probably gets a pass because her mom died. We see her make a mooncake offering at a small shrine in her house, which is common for families that have lost a family member. You put their picture up and then leave offerings like fruit and incense for them. Back in the kitchen, there's again a bunch of random but very Chinese things, like the strings of garlic, the bottles of soy sauce and vinegar on the shelf that are probably like really greasy, the scale and stove that look like they're from the 1980s, and of course, the bright plastic thermoses in the background. They are such a thing in China. People generally don't like to drink cold water because of a belief that it's bad for your health, and also the tap water usually isn't safe to drink anyway. So most families have a bunch of these thermoses standing around with boiled water in them. And the Mid-Autumn Festival is coming around yet again, so Fei-fei and her dad get busy. In this scene where a family is taking a photo, Fei-fei tells them to say 茄子, which means eggplant, but it's just the equivalent of saying cheese when taking a photo. As Fei-fei sets off to deliver more mooncakes, we get to see more of modern China, including the iconic Guangchangwu, or plaza dancing, where a bunch of people get together in a public plaza and follow a chill, choreographed dance. There's a stereotype that only middle-aged aunties do it, but it's for all ages. It's just for exercising purposes, like it's just a fun group activity. Then Fei-fei goes to a construction site. There's always construction in modern China. You can hear the ping-ping-pings of construction through the windows of your gated residential condo because there's always some new project nearby. And Fei-fei in particular gushes over the technology of magnetic levitation trains. China is indeed very proud of its train system, and then she goes home to find a new woman in her dad's life. And she also meets Qin, her soon-to-be stepbrother. He's brought a frog with him. Frogs, or technically toads, are another animal that's associated with the moon in Chinese myth. And also here, there's a discrepancy between Qin's name in the English version and his name in Mandarin. Coco! In the English version, he's just Qin. In the Chinese subs, he's Xiaoqing or Little Qing instead. This is because it's generally very strange to refer to someone by just one syllable in Chinese. Like, most Chinese names have 3 syllables, the family name and then 2 meaningful characters. If someone's name is, say, Wang Yibo, you can just call him Yibo, no problem. But there are also a lot of Chinese names with just 2 syllables, like the family name and then a single meaningful character, like Xiao Zhan. In that case, other Chinese people wouldn't call him just Zhan. We'd either call him by his full name or add some kind of modifier to it, like Zhan or Zhan Gege, or just repeat the syllable. Zhan. It's just a thing, like calling someone by just one character sounds very, very strange to the Chinese ear. But anyway, Fei-fei is in the middle of realizing that her dad might be remarrying when her hot aunts show up for the family dinner. Another discrepancy here, in English, they're just her aunts. We don't know how exactly they're related, but in Chinese, they're specifically her dagu and ergu, meaning that they're her dad's eldest and second eldest sisters. Yeah, Chinese family titles are like really specific. You know exactly who you're related to on like which side of your family. And Fei-fei's dagu has brought live squirming crabs to the party, which is totally accurate as well. It is not a Chinese festival dinner without some crabs getting steamed alive in a pot. If you get invited to one of these dinners, it's considered rude to show up empty-handed, so you better bring some kind of food or gifts. And also, like, only one person of your family delegation needs to be bringing the gifts, so... Also, it is totally accurate that the aunties are much better looking than the uncles. For dinner, Fei-fei's family makes a lot of dishes that are familiar to me, like the mushrooms stir-fried with bok choy, the shrimp stir-fried with peas, and lion heads, which are those giant meatballs there, and also just like slices of raw tomatoes with a bit of sugar sprinkled over them. That's a very Chinese way of eating tomatoes. And of course, there's also braised pork belly, which is darkened with soy sauce and braised with like ginger and sugar and other stuff. Though I don't eat most of these things anymore because I turned vegan. Do you guys have any idea how hard it is to be an East Asian vegan? Anyway, the family has their meal in the courtyard of the residence, which is common if you live in like a traditional residence with one of these courtyards and you have a lot of guests over. At dinner, the family discusses and acknowledges the various versions of Chang'e's legends. Miss Zhong, Fei-fei's upcoming stepmother, says that she might be related to Houyi actually. Chinese people claim this sort of stuff all the time, and it's at least like partially plausible. I mean, if you lived thousands of years ago and you had a lot of children, then you are gonna have so many descendants. I personally have been told that my family on my mom's side is descended from the Imperial Li clan of the Tang Dynasty. It's not as impressive as it sounds. There are so many of us. There were so many Lis back then. But Fei-fei ends up getting really riled up by the Chang'e discussion, especially when her dagu says, oh, it's just a silly myth. And so Fei-fei storms off. Miss Zhong comes to give her a mooncake in a tin that looks very much like the tins that I used to store my stationery in when I went to school in China. Oh man, stationery cases in China could get so wild. When I was flying into Canada once, I made airport security gasp when I opened my case and like 3 whole tears sprang out. Oh yeah, she was your girl until she saw my 3-tiered stationery case. While Fei-fei is stressing out about her dad not believing in Chang'e anymore, a ray of moonlight leads her to a crane. It's implied that this crane is her mother's spirit trying to get her to move on. Cranes are seen as very spiritual animals in Chinese myth. But Fei-fei's not ready to move on. No, she gets the idea to build a rocket to fly to the moon instead, and starts intensely studying rocket science. Fun fact about China's space program though, a lot of their stuff is named after mythological concepts, so there's like the Chang'e landers, the Yutu rovers named after the Jade Rabbit, and also the Tiangong space stations named after the Heavenly Court, and so on. Fei-fei buys over 100 things for this rocket project under the guise of doing a science project, and it's actually very representative of how robust the online shopping industry in modern China is. Like, unless you live in a really remote area, you could buy anything online, and it will be delivered to you in like 2 to 3 days. It really feels like they're in 2030, while I'm here in Canada, waiting at least a week for everything like it's 1990. And Fei-fei is so consumed by the rocket project that she is even distracted at school, which gets a quick roasting from her teacher. There is no mercy in Chinese schools. They will literally put up a ranking board of every student in the class by grade, and the lowest scoring students are generally ridiculed. And grades are not considered privacy that needs to be respected. Oh no. And this pecking order also follows you around the entire school year, because you're stuck with the same group of classmates through everything. The teachers are the ones who move around, not the students, and I actually think that's like a more logical system to have. And also here, you can witness the absolutely atrocious Chinese winter school uniforms that I had to wear as a kid. They basically only come with red or blue accents, and they make you suffer aesthetically. Anyway, while Fei-fei sings about an epiphany about using magnetic levitation to propel her rocket, somehow. The poem on the board is a famous one written by Song Dynasty poet Su Dongpo, or Su Shi, not pronounced sushi. It's basically about how much he misses his brother on the Mid-Autumn Festival. Aww. With this epiphany, Fei-fei actually builds a functioning rocket. Which is just another example of how anything you can do, there's a 12-year-old Asian child out there who can do it better. And she even would have actually made it if little Chin hadn't stuck on board and messed up her weight calculations. Instead, they have to be rescued by gay moon lions. Well, the movie calls them lions, but if they're winged, then they're probably more inspired by Pixiu, a creature that looks like a winged lion with short antlers. The gay moon lions take Fei-fei and Chin to Lunaria, which is a totally original place that the production team designed. In myth, Chang'e's residence on the moon is called the Guanghan Palace. This movie clearly went with the idea that Chang'e evolved with the times after becoming the moon goddess. Now, she's a goddess / pop star. This is pretty far from the vibe she has in myth, so I've seen some complaints from Chinese people in China saying that she's too Western and different from Eastern beauty standards. But honestly, I'm glad for the rep because I've had so many people tell me that she looks like a 3D cartoon me. And I've never been able to say that for any cartoon character, so... Like, we don't all want to look as young and sweet as possible. Upon meeting Fei-fei, Chang'e demands the gift from her, but for some reason, refuses to specify what it is. This makes more sense in the Chinese version because she says the memento instead. Fei-fei, though, wants a picture with Chang'e to prove to her dad that Chang'e is real, but Chang'e refuses to let her have the picture without handing over the memento. This is because this is her last chance to see Houyi for some reason, and only the memento can bring them together. At one point, a frog splats onto Chang'e's face. Fun fact, in one version of her story, she asked the sorcerer to divine her future before deciding what to do with the immortality pills. The sorcerer said that she must go to the furthest west alone, and there will be lots of darkness, but if she is not afraid, then she will reach her destination and have a bright future with plenty of descendants. Therefore, she took both pills, but ended up turning into a toad once she landed on the moon. And the prophecy is technically true because toads have lots of descendants. Anyway, Chang'e announces a moon-wide competition to find the memento. Fei-fei hitches a ride with the angry birds for some reason. I don't know why they're here. While Chin enters a ping pong match with Chang'e to give Fei-fei her photo. Why ping pong? This is just because Chinese people are obsessed with ping pong. Like, have you seen the ping pong finales every Olympics? It's like almost always Chinese versus Chinese. There's no suspense. And this whole sequence doesn't really make any sense, but it's all worth it for Ping Pong Chang'e rapping. Meanwhile, Fei-fei rides Mad Max Fury Road style with the angry birds to her rocket crash site, where she thinks the memento is. There, she runs into Ken Jeong, whose character is named Gobi. After the Gobi Desert? I don't know, the character's name in Chinese is Jello instead. Since Chang'e didn't specify what the memento is, Fei-fei thinks it must be the Chang'e doll that her mother gave her. And the angry birds betray her and take it for themselves. Damn. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Jade Rabbit is scrambling to make another thing that's necessary for Chang'e to see Houyi. The English version says it's a potion, but the Chinese version says it's a medicine, which is accurate to what he actually makes in Chinese myth. Fei-fei's rabbit Bungie, who was earlier shown to have developed a crush on Jade Rabbit on sight, stumbles upon him and manages to provide the missing final ingredient, which is implied to be love. Aww. But Fei-fei is still caught up in action sequences with a bunch of giant moon frogs now, so Chang'e is still stressing out. She sings 2 lines of Mandarin that aren't translated in the English subs, but it's "I wish you everlasting love in every lifetime." And back in Fei-fei's action sequences, the doll gets ripped apart and Fei-fei thinks it's all over. But when Ken Jeong makes her eat the mooncake that Miss Zhong gave her to cheer herself up, Fei-fei discovers that there's a half of a jade pendant inside. Now, jade pendants could work as contracts in ancient China, like the general terms were carved onto it and then the pendant was broken in half, and each party carried a piece. So this pendant is probably symbolic of Chang'e and Houyi's promises to each other. Fei-fei rushes the pendant back to Chang'e, and with the help of Jade Rabbit's medicine, Houyi appears. Chang'e and Houyi sing to each other, partially in Mandarin, and the Mandarin is, "Thoughts of you are so difficult to bear, I wish I could be with you." And Chang'e has also reverted to the way she's traditionally depicted, which is like very Tang Dynasty. This is because the Tang Dynasty aesthetic is considered the most ethereal and fairy-like, so it fits her moon goddess image the most. Once again, if you want to learn more about Tang Dynasty makeup, I've got an infographic on my Instagram, link in the description below. And while Chang'e is beyond happy to see Houyi again, he says that he unfortunately can't actually stay, and that she has to move on. And then he disappears. This sends Chang'e into a deep despair that extinguishes all the light in Lunaria. Fei-fei tries to go talk her out of it, but ends up getting confronted with her own grief over her mother's death. Fei-fei and Chang'e then help each other out of their grief by comforting each other, with Fei-fei learning to accept her new brother and the new family that she's gonna have, and Chang'e learning to just be happy with her family of lunar minions. Then the light comes back to Lunaria and Fei-fei gets ready to leave, though her bunny Bungie wants to stay with Jade Rabbit. Bungie? You met him 20 minutes ago! But alright! So Chang'e lets Fei-fei take the picture of them together back home, though it burns up on the way back to Earth, but Fei-fei isn't really bothered by that, because now she's emotionally mature enough to not need the legend of Chang'e anymore. And back on Earth, we receive a full shot confirmation that the lions of Fei-fei's town are gay. Double smooth balls. Watch out for those. Then there's a time skip to after Fei-fei's dad and Chin's mom get married. They have a picture in Western-style wedding wear, but they probably have a whole album in a whole range of outfits. That's just a thing Chinese people do when they get married. And after a lively mid-autumn festival meal with her new family, Fei-fei receives a visit from the crane that may or may not be her mother's spirit one last time. Seeing that Fei-fei has moved on, the crane flies off to join a flock of other cranes. And so ends this movie. So this was a nice heartwarming but also bittersweet movie, and it's definitely worth watching for Chang'e alone. She's voiced by Philippa Soo, also known as Eliza from Hamilton. Anyway, thanks for watching all of that, and I hope you learned lots about modern China and Chinese myth from all of my rambling. If you want to see more videos from me, consider supporting me on Patreon. There you can vote on my next video topics and also receive exclusive updates about both my books and the videos that I'm working on. And I can't leave without plugging my book, so my book Iron Widow, it's a Pacific Rim meets The Handmaid's Tale reimagining of the only female emperor in Chinese history, and it comes out fall next year from Penguin Random House. I will probably have the cover soon, hopefully. And also I have other top secret book news that are on my Patreon exclusive feed, so if you're curious, the link is in the description. And see you next video, which is gonna be I don't even know how long I'm gonna take. My god, I'm so slow. I'm sorry the election messed me up. Bye.